I'm Michael Eager. I'm the local secretary for San Francisco Regional Mensa. And our speaker today is Cory Sylvester from Portland. As a young adult, Cory saw a performance that shaped his trajectory of his life. He spent 10 years pursuing a dream to perform that same act that had inspired him, to give back the same inspiration he received from the magic created by watching just one show. A Journey to the Circus is a story from the initial spark of a meaningful pursuit through the first day Cory stepped foot on stage to bring the inspiration full circle. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, please welcome Cory Sylvester with A Journey to the Circus.
Thank you, Michael. There's a fire in me that wants to burn, that wants to shine. Don't quite know what it is yet, but I know that there's something there. I remember the first time I went to see the circus show. In fact, it was the first time I went to see a live show of any sort. It's my 20th birthday, and it's my gift to my father, so I take him to see the world-famous Cirque du Soleil. We sat in the audience of the big top with eager anticipation. The show opens up with a kid sitting in her living room, probably bored, and at the drop of a hat, the show begins and her world starts to change very quickly. Performers in these strange white suits start running chaotically around the stage, almost as though a storm was about to arrive and pass right through her comfortable living room. A single performer rolls out in a big wheel amidst the chaos and rolls right to the front of the stage, standing inside of his big wheel, stoic and patient, waiting for the right moment to do his work. I leaned into my dad and I said, "Dad, it's starting." And little did I know that something in that moment actually was starting. For 5 minutes, I watched this warrior move and manipulate this wheel around the stage. He flipped around the bars. He flipped onto the ground. He spun this big wheel like it was nothing. The lights, the music, the character, the images. I could even hear the sounds he made while performing. Something about his performance that I could really feel. It was like a tornado came through and stirred up the comfortably settled dust. And he stirred something up in me. He stirred up something in me and inspired me in a way that I couldn't have even imagined. If there was any kind of fire burning inside of me, seeing that show gave fuel to that fire. I wanted to be this guy on stage. I wanted to stir up the dust in somebody's world as he did for me. And in that state of beautiful inspiration at the end of the show, I saw an ad in the back of the program that read, "If this is your dream, it can be possible. Join us at the National Circus School." Now, if seeing the show gave me fuel to a fire, knowing that it was possible for me actually gave breath to that fire and started to bring it to life. But where did the spark come from? Fuel and breath are essential to a fire, but nothing without an initial spark. The theatricality, the spectacle, could be a source of that spark, but in my case, the initial spark came from something much more simple and quiet. 3 months before, I'm hiking through the forest with my father. We'd just begun to rekindle our relationship after a few years of not having much of one. The mood is very easygoing, and the two of us are just spending time together. In the heart of the woods, we both stopped to notice a small chipmunk standing on a branch close to the ground. Right before our eyes, this chipmunk does a little flip around the branch, another little flip in the air, and lands on the ground. This is so simple, yet my eyes are wide open. My father and I both see it happen, and we both are left with the same expressions of wonder on our faces. A playful moment in nature, and the impact on me is profound. The days to follow, I start having dreams about squirrels and chipmunks doing handstands on top of each other. I even end up drawing these dreams that I'm having of all of these animals doing these human circus things. And mind you, this is all happening months before I even take my father to see the show. This was the spark that gave me a glimpse into a larger world. It was a real gift, and it came from a relaxed state of mind. Fast forward again to the end of the show, and I'm so empowered to jump into action that I want everyone to whom it doesn't even occur that there's bigger things that are possible to get out of their chair and to step into action with things that they wished to do. And I'll tell you what, for 10 years after that moment, I pursued something that I dared to call a dream. And pursuing something genuinely, especially with the desire to give back, tends to have a very special way of aligning us with meaningful things. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, I'd like to share a story with you about saying yes. Saying yes to serendipity, grace, and stick-to-it-tive-ness. It's the journey of my own 10-year inspired pursuit toward my dream to travel the world as an acrobatic performer for the Cirque du Soleil. At the time of seeing the circus, I was pursuing a career doing special effects for movies. It was a job that I was really enjoying. One Friday morning, I remember showing up to work after seeing the show, and I got this crazy hunch that I needed to quit my job so that I could spend my days training for the circus. The idea took a strong enough place in my mind that I promised myself that I would make a decision by my 4 o'clock break. End of the day comes and I tell my supervisor that I'm not coming back on Monday. He was completely surprised because he knew how much I liked my job, and he asked me why, and I had no better answer other than to shrug my shoulders and say, a hunch. I didn't tell a single person why I was leaving. Everything felt so right from the moment that I made the choice that I was going to be quitting my job. Making the choice is one thing. Understanding the choice, that's the real journey. Actually quitting my job was the first glimpse of the enormity of the gap between a potential dream and reality. The reality was very sobering. I stepped out of the land of naive and into the land of having an experience. That experience felt very different than the idea of it. I sat in my car and I cried for a half an hour after what I had just done. I had taken a step based off of a hunch, and I have no sense as to what I'm actually supposed to do. Why? Why would I do such a thing? What was I actually supposed to do now? I feel that there was a spark of inspiration that magically carried me to make this move, and I had no idea how I was going to generate this kind of momentum on my own. It was definitely a lot safer when it existed just as an idea. The best actions that I could come up with was to go to the park the following day and to start to play on the monkey bars and do these kind of uncoordinated things. After spending some time at the park just doing something, I might have been blessed by a curious onlooker that was kind enough to offer corrections to the moves that I was trying. I start to see that if I'm going for it in a sincere way, encouragements start to show up. And little by little, I would generate a minuscule amount of momentum on my own efforts. And the more that I would innocently move my own efforts toward that spark that I remembered, the more micro sparks would show up and push me further. I started to take up doing yoga in my living room to videotapes. A neighbor of mine sees me doing some sort of yoga headstand and invites me to try something called the flying trapeze. It was in somebody's backyard and it was free, and that was pretty much the right price. Can you imagine the first time climbing up to the ladder of a flying trapeze, abouting to take off? Abouting is a word. I made it up. All words are made up. Made it up. Standing on the platform, about 1,000,000 feet up in the air, ready to go. Ready or not, here I go. That's your experience when you're standing on the flying trapeze platform for the first time. It sure seems like a great dream when you're thinking about it, but when you're standing up there, there is a different reality that hits you in a very unexpected way. I very clumsily took my leaps, and probably 8 times out of 10, the literal net would appear. The other 2 times I would actually bounce off of the net and roll onto the ground. But that's part of learning. I even eventually, though very uncomfortable with it, said yes to learning how to pull the safety lines to keep other people safe. Meanwhile, back at my previous job, where I hadn't mentioned to a single person why it was that I was leaving, rumors started to go around about me that maybe he had run away and joined the circus. It was a funny rumor, but it caught the attention of one of my previous coworkers. She called me and mentioned that she thought that it was really interesting that I would quit a perfectly good job to pursue a dream. And she invited me to a seminar program that was going to be coming up about taking bold steps. Sounded like the right step. I went to my first weekend personal development seminar. At the seminar, I meet a man named Peter Gold, and in sharing with him why it was I was there and my dream to go to the circus school, I learned that he had just been traveling with Ringling Brothers for the past 11 years, and he told me that if I was to take on working at Club Med, learning how to be a circus skills instructor, then he would take me on as an instructor at the new school that he was opening up in Nevada. Recruiters were coming to town, and because of saying yes to learning how to pull lines on the flying trapeze in somebody's backyard, I was able to start a conversation to work for Club Med. Working for Club Med was a great experience because I learned how to teach. I taught guests to do the flying trapeze and other circus skills, and I was performing on a weekly basis. Finally, after a year of working for Club Med, I gained enough skill to apply to the National Circus School in Montreal, my dream school. I just remember waiting and waiting and waiting for an answer for them to come back to me as to if I was going to be accepted or not. And then finally, 2 weeks after the deadline that they were supposed to respond to me, I finally ended up calling my mother from Club Med, and I said, "Mom, have you heard anything?" And she says, "Well, there is some kind of a big packet of information here." It was my acceptance packet. And I was like, "Mom, this is the most important thing to me in this moment in my life." And she waited 2 whole weeks to tell me the answer to it. Whatever, I can't honestly expect that it's going to be as important to somebody else as it is to me. But I couldn't believe it. It was such a dream to be accepted into that school. Ever since I'd seen the performance and learned about it in the back of that program. I remember the very first day of circus school, everybody had to stand up by themselves in front of everybody else in the school and describe what their inspiration for being there was. And that vulnerable place of standing up in front of people for the very first time, the simplest answer that got right to the point was movement and balance. That was the core of my inspiration. Many doors have opened up at this point, and I'm realizing that the important thing about these doors opening was because of choosing to say yes and walk through, that it would allow more doors to open. There's been this sort of dialogue between myself and the dream, and the more that I would let the dream know that I was engaged in this dialogue, that is, making my own efforts, the more the dream would respond by also engaging with me, by presenting me with guides, presenting me with encouragements. It was as though the dream welcomed me to achieve this path if I was willing to walk it. Circus school. This was a great college experience. I learned handstands, I learned juggling, acrobatics, walking the tight wire, singing, history of circus, rope climbing, staging, fitness, partner acrobatics. Not to mention the main reason that I was there, and that was to learn what was called the German wheel, which was the apparatus that had inspired me when I saw it in the show, when I initially gained my inspiration. It's a very unique college because at the beginning of each year, it wasn't so exciting to have new books and new backpacks, but rather new pairs of tights and new safety equipment. Nights out with my friends were not spent drinking and doing silly things like smashing mailboxes, but rather drinking and doing silly things like one-armed handstands on bicycle racks. One of my coaches, I'll never forget him, 55-year-old man born in the circus, he would say to me, and please forgive the terrible Russian accent, it's done only with affection. He would say to me, "Cory, show me your favorite move." Now, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. He'd say, "Show me your favorite move." And I would respond with, "And what is my favorite move, Alex?" And he would say to me, "Show me front handspring." Now, for those that don't know, front handspring is where you run and place your hands on the ground and then your feet sort of flip over your back and land on the ground. He would say to me, "Show me front handspring." "Never mind, I show you." And then he would go over and do a front handspring. 8 in the morning, 55 years old. And he would come back to me and he would say, "No warm-up, no problem." It was easy for him. He would teach us to train our minds as well as our bodies, to eat properly for pacing ourselves or to push through difficult things cheerfully. I remember doing partner acrobatics one time with my partner doing a handstand on top of me. And if you saw my face in this moment, you would really be on board with just how painful it was to be holding this person up on top of me. And when onlookers would walk by, he would say to me, "Cory, when there is public, don't show torture, only show pleasure." He was awesome. With our training, I'm actually not exaggerating when I tell you that he would have us run through waist-deep snow on a daily basis. It was a time of pushing my young limits, developing my character, and I finished circus school with my own act. I was kind of on top of the world in the years to come. My fire was well ablaze. Finishing circus school was a great landing after a great leap. I had a completed act that I was proud of and starting to get paid for with corporate events and galas. I had gigs right out of circus school that traveled me to Europe to work, and others that would tour me around the US. I drove myself across the country back to Los Angeles and settled into playing 2 superheroes at local theme parks, both of which I got to use my circus skills to perform different stunts. As Batman, I did driving stunts like jumping the Batmobile over a 6-foot river before starting to beat up the bad guys. And I played Spider-Man at a movie theme park, where I would swing from one building top to another and then slide down a big rope and then run in slow motion in front of Marilyn Monroe's car to save the oblivious guests from a dramatic flattening at 2 miles an hour. They were pretty much the coolest jobs that I could think of having at the time. I remember another very real taste of shifting from a sobering reality to from a dream to a sobering reality the first time I put on my Spider-Man costume. I ran out into the park just ready to take on the world, and then once people started to come toward me and I realized that I wasn't actually able to jump above the crowds with stunning acrobatics, shoot my webs to the nearest building and swing out of there, I just shrunk. I was a nobody wearing the skin of a hero, and I had no idea how to meet the expectations of the adoring public that was running toward me. Well, as it turns out, that shrinking was actually very useful because it brought my center of gravity down. My knee goes out to the side, elbow high, palm energized, and with great vulnerability, I discovered my first signature Spider-Man pose. The idea of being this hero was awesome. The doing of it took some guts. In Los Angeles, I catch word of a man who's opening up an indoor flying trapeze close to where I live. I went in to check out his operation and could see that it was very clearly a place that had a lot of potential, but that could also use my particular expertise in teaching. I agreed to help him get his new school off the ground, and in turn, I closed a small circle of my own story. Where once upon a time ago I had the flying trapeze given to me for free, now I have the opportunity to offer it for free, because having flying trapeze for free is a grand thing. Things are going well. I've come a long way. I've closed a circle of my own. I'm now giving back. Superhero jobs. I was becoming involved in the world of doing stunts for movies. Had been through circus school that I funded myself by working summers at summer camps teaching flying trapeze. With my experience, I was somewhat of a big deal in my world. I was respected as the only guy who had the skills that I had. I had pretty much made it at this point, which I'd say is quite possibly one of the most dangerous attitudes to take on when in pursuit of something meaningful. I would wish to tell you that the great momentum that I've built at this point just kept driving forward, but the truth is, I've actually found quite a bit of comfort in the place that I've made it to. Time goes by, and before I realize, I'm actually no longer feeding my fire, but more just sitting comfortably with the embers that are after a strong flame. The satisfaction of my current story starts to outweigh the hunger for more. I start to become okay to allow my impossible dream to be in the circus remain in the land of impossible rather than in the land of it could be possible. The pursuit of a dream becomes nonchalant. And the problem is that the more nonchalant I become toward my original pursuit, the more nonchalant that the pursuit becomes toward me also. I had settled into knowing that I would never actually be good enough to really go for the dream that I had once upon a time before. And my settled attitude and my nonchalance drives me into a fight with my closest cousin, and the pain of pushing that relationship away causes me to go deeper into my own difficult parts about myself, facing my insecurities not only of myself as a performer or someone who is following a dream, but myself as a person. Doubts, accomplishments, more doubts, complacency. I really don't quite know what role I have to play in my pursuit anymore, but I'm trying desperately to grasp at the spark of energy that I had that I once knew and trying to ride the energy from that spark. I just wish that I would find another sign or someone or something that would tell me who I am. Maybe I need to go back to the woods. Maybe that's where I'll find some answers of where I am. I'm 27 years old. I'm hiking through the mountains in Southern California, very, very early in the morning. Dawn has not yet cracked the horizon. Haze from the top of the mountain bleeds all the way down to the earth, giving a feeling of mystery throughout the day. I'm on a sacred journey to create a story of what I've accomplished so far and to bring back a symbol that tells me who I am. I start to tune in to the teachings that my mountain has to offer. I notice that the deer is more alert and realize that maybe I should be more alert to my surroundings. Or I notice that the river not only conforms to the environment, but it also shapes the environment. And maybe that's a good lesson for me to use with my own attitude or way of being. I even take the time to listen to the rocks. Now, I don't know if you've ever spent much time absorbing the wisdom of rocks, but I'm serious when I tell you that they have something to say. They don't move their lips and they don't make a sound, but somewhere in the silence of rocks, there are secrets. Now, those secrets are often buried within eternities of silence, and I've really only got one day, so I decide to fill the silence with the noise of the story that I'm going to create. I start to think about how I'm going to tell my story and how I'm going to start talking about the haze bleeding down from the mountain and how the river has something to do with conforming my attitude. River, haze, deer. This is good stuff. I can already start to feel the satisfaction of the story even before I start. There's a river ahead. It looks difficult to cross, but I was training my body quite a lot of the time, so crossing the river was almost going to be granted that it was going to be easy enough. I leap from one rock to another and another. Easy enough that I can keep spending my mental energy working on my story of glory. I leap again and another, and I twist my ankle. Oh, how discouraging. Add to story, twist ankle, no biggie. I leap again, another, and this time, before I land, I realize another landing that's going to get me ahead further and faster, and I decide to upgrade even before I land. Great choice. I land in a way that pulls a muscle in my back and pulls it hard. Oh, what have I done? I was feeling so hopeful, and now I'm feeling so doubtful. I feel like my story of glory is becoming a tale of woe. I will my way through the self-doubt, and I continue to move forward. One leap, another, and I become blessed with the opportunity to make the same mistake twice. This time, before I land, I see another landing that's going to not only protect my back, but it's also going to be more comfortable, and I start feeling clever even before I land. Well, the reality of my landing turns out to be a much better teacher than the pre-written story of my landing. This time, I land in a way that I pull a muscle in my groin. Now what? My back hurts, my groin hurts, my spirit hurts. And wouldn't you know that the most important thing to me in this moment is to get busy creating the story of how I twisted my ankle, pulled a muscle in my back, pulled a muscle in my groin while heroically crossing a river so that I could bring home a great story? The thoughts in my head are moving as fast as the river below. Creating my story was giving me energy. Should I continue forward into the story that I've gotten myself into, or should I go back and risk forgetting it all and letting it all go? If I go forward, then my story, my heroic journey becomes one of fruition, and if I go back, it becomes that of disappointment. Both forward and back are as difficult as each other. And there I am, sitting on a rock in the middle of a river, head full of stories, unwilling to decide if I should continue forward across the river or if I should go back. Unwilling to decide because not deciding is the only thing that seems comfortable. I can't stay here. The obvious notion that I couldn't stay in the middle of the river just brought me to settle down for a second, to tune back in to the things that I've learned, to tune into the very rock that I'm sitting on. Oh, how thankful I am for the silence of rocks. The silent state of rocks brought me to understand that I needed to be simple, that I was going to arrive to the riverbanks by doing one thing, and that it was not by indulging in a story. Somewhere in the silent space between doubt and disappointment, the solution was to move my physical center. One small point that's much simpler than moving a head full of stories. I leaped from one rock to another and arrived safely to the riverbanks, having taken even greater risks than before when I was all up in my head about what a great story this was going to make. You see, forward or backward didn't actually matter. What mattered was that I was able to settle my thoughts down enough to hear my own wisdom. What I learned was this: while reflecting and writing the story is important, when it's at the expense of the present journey that's unfolding, it's only done so in vain and does not serve anybody. The river was a metaphoric threshold of a story for me to let go of being my own self-important story. It was a humbling reflection of a story that was preventing me from listening not only to my own silent wisdom, but to a very real dialogue between myself and something bigger than myself that I call grace. I had gone to the woods to create a story and to prove my own significance, and it was only by letting go of my significance that the real growth could occur. I continue about, in a very humble way, searching now for something to tell me who I am at this time in my life. I'm asking everything around me for the answer. I asked everything that I could hear to see if there's anything that I could hear, and it never occurred to me to ask myself. You see, I was in search, hoping that this answer would be told to me, and true to form to the rest of my journey up until this point, it was only after I made my own choice to what the answer was that the encouragement from the outside was presented. I chose the words movement and balance, just like my first day of circus school. It felt right. It made perfect sense. It lit me up to think of what I had discovered. And in making that choice, and in really settling into this choice, I look down to my feet and I find the most magnificent treasure. 3 delicate, beautiful dragonfly wings on the ground, as though whatever had chomped the dragonfly had left the wings behind in perfect formation, sitting on the ground as though they were still attached to the dragonfly. Magnificent. What better to represent movement and balance than a creature of such agility as the dragonfly? They can move in any direction that they choose with almost magical precision. Finding the dragonfly wings only after I'd made up my own decision as to who I was taught me that when it came to deciding who I am, maybe the choice actually is up to me. In an exercise of good manners, I decided to ask if this gift was for me, and I slowly started to pack them carefully between leaves and pieces of bark. I'd learned the lesson of letting go of my own self-important story that prevented me from hearing my own conversations with grace. I'd learned that there was not something that was going to tell me who I was. In my case, there was an alignment with luck that represented a reward, but only after I'd made the decision for myself. And in the process of taking great care to bring these wonderful treasures home, I came to understand that when we are presented with a gift, we have a responsibility to carry it safely and to nurture it long enough for it to take flight on its own. Because the real gift might not be the thing or the insight or the understanding of something. The real gift might be the chance to be the vessel to share that lesson and gift with the world. 3 lessons, 3 wings. And in letting go of the outer story of myself, I was able to apologize to my dear cousin, with which I'd had the great fight with. He'd been on a journey of his own. During his sacred time on the mountain, he learned to literally make fire from dried sticks and leaves. When I gave him one of my treasures, one of the wings, he responded by passing his own gift back to me and teaching me the art of making fire. When you're making fire, a small spark that is so fragile starts, and you have to nurture its vulnerability. You have to be calm yet active and respect it for the beast that it is. As I rekindled my relationship with my cousin, I also rekindled my own flame. And now I have a fresh way of looking at things. Back to my normal life. Things have started to shift for me. My fire is starting to ask for fuel again. Working for the Cirque du Soleil was an impossible dream for me, one that had safely resided beyond my reach. If you had asked me before, I might have said, yeah, it would be great to work for the Cirque du Soleil. It must be amazing. A very safe way to make a statement. It would be great if. And I would probably wait for the evidence to show that it was okay for me to call it a dream. But things have shifted now, and I can make my own choice as to what it is that I dare to call a dream. I found purpose in my training again, because now I understood that it wasn't going to come from the outside of me. In a matter of only a few weeks, I had made up my mind, completely upgraded my act, shot and edited a video on the local outdoor basketball courts, and with the gracious help from my wonderful grandmother only 2 weeks before she passed away, I got on a plane to Montreal to meet with the casting director for the company where I dreamed to work. I flew out to Cirque headquarters on Tuesday morning, met with Dana Brass for 45 minutes during her lunch break, where I was able to build a little bit of rapport, share my video, and express my interests. Wow, that feeling of the reality of doing something versus the idea of doing something has definitely shown up again. Why? Why did I fly so far, spend so much of my grandmother's money to meet with somebody for 45 minutes and then fly home? I'm a big fan of showing your face in a place that you want to work, but after making this move, I really hope that everything about myself, that this was not done in vain. Back home, I go to volunteer for the indoor flying trapeze place, continuing to train on the wheel for the next few months. The Cirque du Soleil hosts auditions at different locations around the country. And then as it turns out, for the very first time, they were going to be in the same city that I was going to be, and I was actually going to be available to do so. And as it also turns out, volunteering at a place to position myself to give back some of the wonderful things that I'd received also had a great benefit for me. Cirque du Soleil seemed to have caught word of a man who was opening up a flying trapeze near where I lived and had coordinated to host the auditions there. The auditions were going to be at the same place that I had already established myself at. Nothing creates opportunity like preparedness, and I am glad that the opportunity had finally aligned with me being prepared for it. Insecurities aside with how imperfect my act was, I knew that I was better off performing something really well rather than spending the energy worrying about if I was good enough. If I performed my act, I would perform and I would demonstrate silly things, silly acting exercises, strength exercises. I even climbed to the top of the rope, and once I got there, they asked me to sing something. And in the blink of an eye, my brain said, I could sing this. No, I don't want to sing this. It's going to look stupid. Oh, wait, they want me to kind of look stupid. If I was a rich girl, blah, 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 money in the world. If I was a wealthy girl. Didn't even know the words, but they didn't want to test my singing. They just wanted to test my vulnerability. And wouldn't you know that by the grace of it all, the host of the audition was the very same Dana Brass that I'd flown out to meet a few months before to deliver my video to? I didn't even know until I walked in the door. My choices were starting to make sense to me. I had rapport already built and the added confidence for the day. I was able to help out during the auditions, and the great thing is that now I had a person to actually write an email to. Made it all the way through the day without getting cut, and I followed up with Dana on an email a little bit of time afterward. And I said to her, Dana, I just wanted to let you know I'm really interested in performing for Quidam for Cirque du Soleil. Quidam was the name of the show that had initially inspired me 9 years before. And she responded in an email saying, Dear Cory, everything is status quo with Quidam right now, but rest assured that if anything changes, we'll be sure and call you right away. And I highlighted this email and I put it on my desk, and I sat it near my desk so that I would be able to see it every single day. The whole thing was that I didn't want to miss this boat if it was actually going to come in. When I was putting my wheel together and putting it on top of a trailer to tow behind my bike that I had built to go to the basketball courts, I wasn't going to the basketball courts to train or to practice doing the German wheel. I was going to the basketball courts to already be doing 10 shows a week for Quidam. Quidam was the name of the show. My purpose was great at this point. I found myself in the space of existing something into existence. I decided to complete a section of my spiritual quest with my father by going back to the original forest where we'd seen the chipmunk 9.5 years before. By making the choice to stay the course, another little spark showed up to let me know that I was on the right path. Night before leaving for the forest, the director from the show called me just to ask me if I was in for the long haul. After the call, I almost felt that I'd arrived, that it was about to happen. But you know something, I'd come too far and learned too much to indulge in celebrating the story too early. Back to the forest, a week of prayer and intention. My father and I, we see 2 golden eagles take off from the ground of the lakeshore where we were walking. We watched very carefully where they landed, and we hiked all the way around the lake to be able to find out if there was an important part of our journey that was left behind. However, this is not a story about the eagles landing. This is a story about the eagles taking off. We hiked back to the spot where they had started their flight from, and there we found a beautiful feather on top of a stick waiting to be either claimed or not. Now, in an exercise of good manners, I very carefully asked if this gift was for me, and I took very great care in transporting it back to safety. And the whole process that I had gone through after transporting it safely back was to get really in touch with something honest. You see, what I found out was the gift wasn't for me. The gift was for me to give away. I settled in my heart knowing that I was going to be giving this magnificent gift away. And at that moment that I settled into my heart knowing that this was going to happen, the phone rang and I was offered a contract from the Cirque du Soleil to perform the same role that had inspired me once upon a time before. I was on my way, for real. I cried in the car in front of my dad for 20 minutes. I don't know if that phone call would have happened or not had I not completed the path that I was currently on by going back to the forest. What I do know is that staying the course was part of my own inner journey. The 9.5 years up to this point have been about building me into the kind of person that was able to do the job that I was working toward. Arriving at the dream is not the end, it's the beginning, and it's taken me almost a decade to understand this. In bringing this story to conclusion, I have one more sort of test of commitment, if you will, to share with you. I've been training for my specific role at Cirque du Soleil headquarters in Montreal for a few months now. I'm 4 days away from leaving to being on the touring show that will occupy the next 10 years of my life. I'm on a trampoline practicing one of 5 million backflips that the head coach inspired me to do. Now, I thought that you weren't supposed to wear sneakers on the trampoline because you didn't want to get the trampoline dirty. But since my sneakers were fresh out of the box, I thought that they would be acceptable to use on the trampoline. But what I didn't know was that the shape of the sneakers catches the trampoline incorrectly. 4 days before leaving to start my dream job, I fall and I sprain my ankle. Badly. How upsetting. So close, yet so far away. For 6 more weeks, I was blessed with the opportunity to further develop the strength, not only of my character on stage, but also my personal character. My job still wasn't over yet. I am so thankful for the lessons that I'm presented with in my life. I finally arrived 3 days on tour, 3 days of integrating and training, and the directress asked me if I felt ready. Still overwhelmed by the grandeur, a part of me wanted to wait until I felt right about everything. But the truth is, there actually is no ready and no feeling that it's the right time to start. My learning now needed to come from performing. Ready or not, I chose to go. The show begins in 3 hours. 5 minutes before going on the stage to perform for the first time, I find out that the man who originally performed the German wheel in the show that I was performing in was in the audience. By grace and by chance, the man that had inspired me to be in the circus now 10 years before was in the audience and was going to witness my first show. We'd made acquaintances before and we'd met before, but neither of us knew that this special event was about to happen. I howled. 10 years from the moment of inspiration of seeing this warrior move and manipulate this big wheel on the stage, studying, dreaming to be inside the wheel. Now I finally understood something about the circle. I was ready. No expectations other than to do my best. My fellow performers, dressed in strange white suits, ran chaotically around the stage. I rolled my big wheel through the chaos to the front of the stage, fully present, motionless, standing in my wheel, waited with all the patience in the world to begin my work. Am I wondering if there's a child in the audience that's leaning into his father and saying, "Hey, Dad, it's starting"? Nope. Too early to write the story. Right now, I've got work to do, and thus my journey begins. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, thank you.
Thank you for that. This is a marvelous journey, and congratulations on being in the Cirque du Soleil. That's a truly amazing achievement. I'm looking at the German wheel on a website, and I've seen the routine. It seems quite astonishing. Now, I have a couple questions or comments. When you were talking about crossing the river,
Yeah.
and thinking about the story that you were going to tell about crossing the river, I kept thinking about Ram Dass's book from long ago, Be Here Now.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
No.
Oh.
Only the Eckhart Tolle one.
Yeah, he talks about how to be in the moment. It's a California human awareness, but it talks about experiencing what you're experiencing, not thinking about what you're experiencing, which is very much like what you were talking about.
Yeah, I like what you say.
Betty asked, did you have any videos of your performing?
I did, and I had one ready to be able to share with you. I'd be happy to And that's my act.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I think let's see, we have another question here from Judine. How did you manage to get a personal meeting with the casting director?
You know, Judine, that was also a little bit of a matter of luck. I called the casting directors and I didn't have anybody specifically to ask for, but I did find out that there was somebody available to speak to me, and I just said, "Hey, can I?" It seems to me like it was like late in the week, or maybe it might have been a week in advance or something like that. And I said, "Are you available to meet with me on Tuesday? And I'll have lunch with you and show you my video." And that was kind of it. It was just kind of a little bit of a stroke of luck that she was able to meet with me. And she didn't know that I was flying from California to meet with her. She just knew that I kind of probably mentioned it. So I probably only mentioned it just to kind of be clear that I didn't really want the meeting to be changed, because I was going to catch another flight in another 2 hours from after we were meeting. But other than that, just called.
This has been amazing, running off to join the circus, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who has a slight case of acrophobia, the idea of climbing up and reaching out to grab a trapeze bar makes my blood pressure go up really high. So thank you so much, Cory. We appreciate this greatly.
Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.